Hey, I'm Allison from Learning at the Primary Pond. I'm a literacy specialist, and in this video, I'm going to share with you 5 things you want to consider when you are selecting a phonics program. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure to go ahead and do that now, and also hit the little bell so that you're notified every time I post a brand new video about teaching literacy in K2. Okay, so if you're about to choose a phonics program or you're in the middle of choosing a phonics program and it feels overwhelming, not to worry, I've got you covered, but I also want to share that I've been there. So I helped open a brand new school, and as part of that process, I was the director of curriculum and instruction, and I was selecting literacy resources and programs for K-5, and I was also selecting a science and social studies curriculum. So I remember there were like sample materials all over my office at one point. It was a giant hot mess. So I've been there. I know that it can be a little bit overwhelming, but again, I know this video can really help you figure out what you want exactly in a phonics program. Before I go into the 5 things to look for, I also want to acknowledge the different things that you might be thinking about. So number 1, you might be thinking about like what works best for your teaching style. You know, is a whole team adopting the program? Do you have to think about all of them? You're thinking about a whole school? That can kind of vary. Number 2, what is the data showing that your students need? Does your class or your school typically, are they advanced? Are they a little bit behind? So student needs. You might also be thinking about like what fits with your school as a whole. Are there a lot of veteran teachers who don't need a ton of support? Or maybe, they need to be retrained? Or they're brand new teachers? There's just a lot of moving pieces here, right? So I guess even though this is overwhelming, we also need to think about the flip side of not choosing a phonics program. I have been at a school that didn't have any kind of phonics program or curriculum at all, and that's not a good thing either, right? Number 1, if we don't teach phonics, that's not good, right? Watch any of my other videos about phonics to know why phonics instruction is so important and valuable. But number 2, if teachers are forced to come up with their own plans or materials, that's really time consuming, and it doesn't create like a cohesive approach across the year, across the school. And, teaching is a job in itself. Like, we're not supposed to also be curriculum developers at the same time, right? So that's a lot. So it's important that we have a phonics program to begin with. On the other hand, we don't want something that's so rigid that we feel like we can't modify it for our school's needs or, our student needs, the kids that we're seeing in front of us. I am curious, I have a question for you. Have you been at a school where either you had no phonics program whatsoever, or you had one that you had to follow so rigidly that it just ended up not being a good fit for your kids? If you've been in either one of those scenarios, just type yes in the comments so that other teachers know that they are not alone in that. And now let's go ahead and dive into the 5 components that you should look for when you're choosing a phonics program. Okay, so the first thing we want to look for is the program systematic and explicit? Systematic, for it to be systematic, it's got to have a scope and sequence, and the scope and sequence needs to progress from easier skills to harder skills. Pretty basic, right? But for example, so we start with short vowels. We don't start with short vowels, but short vowels come before long vowels. And this sounds pretty basic, but I have heard of programs that spiraled so much that it was just here, there, and everywhere, and the kids weren't focusing on one skill until they mastered it and then moving on. We do want them to focus on a skill until they have achieved a level of mastery before they move on to the next one. So that's super important. Now, review should be built in. That's key as well, but we just don't want the scope and sequence to be here, there, and everywhere. When it comes to explicit, that just means that we're teaching the kids, hey, this is the digraph CH. It can represent the sound ch, and then let's read and write some words that have CH in them. It's very clear, right? The teacher is using clear language, and we're just not relying on the kids to figure this stuff out by themselves. There are tons of patterns in English, and so we want to teach them about all of these patterns. So that's number 1, systematic and explicit. Number 2, you want to look for a phonics program that is based on research and science. There's been so much research done about how the brain learns to read and what phonics instruction could include. So we just want something that takes all of that into account. We want something that also incorporates phonological awareness, because the research indicates that that's a key component of learning to read and phonics instruction. So ideally, if possible, your phonics your phonics program should include phonological awareness instruction. It makes the most sense if these two things are tied together in one program, if possible. Ideally, there should be some multisensory or multimodal instruction where kids are not just, like sitting and filling out worksheets. They're moving things around, they're tracing, maybe some multisensory materials, verbalizing things. So we want it to be multimodal learning because the research supports that for kids with special needs, but actually for all kids as well. Okay, so moving right along to number 3, the third thing that we want to look for in a phonics program is consistency. We know as teachers, when kids learn a routine, then that is just such a time saver because you can repeat that routine over and over again. You can do little twists on it for variety, but kids really thrive on routine. So you want consistent plans, you want a consistent schedule. Ideally, you also want it consistent from year to year as much as possible. So if we're doing something in kindergarten, then maybe the routine is not exactly the same in first grade, but we kind of build on that and make it more first grade appropriate. You also, however, although you want consistency, you want the program to reflect like how kids change throughout the year. So for example, kindergartners and their needs at the very beginning of the year, that's very different from like a mid to late kindergarten class, what they can typically do. So although you want consistently, you want to see that the program is taking this into account. Even in first grade, right? They're different beginning of the year to end of the year and what they can do and how much time they should be spending on different things. Same thing with second grade, right? For example, our phonics program from sounds to spelling has more phonological awareness toward the beginning of the year, and then we still work on phonological awareness, but as the year goes on, there's a little bit less of it, except for example, if you have a student or a group of students who just really still need that. So consistency, yes, but also attention to how kids' needs change throughout the school year. All right, moving along to number 4, we want there to be some room for differentiation and flexibility within the program. So we know as teachers, every class of kids looks different as far as strengths, where they need to grow. And students have different preferences, right? So having a program that builds in opportunities for differentiation just makes it easier on us as teachers to if one student isn't doing well with this, then we spend a little bit more time on it. Or if another student is more advanced, then we can, take what they've got going on and run with it. So there needs to be some level of flexibility because we know that while kids will learn phonics skills in a more or less predictable order, the rate at which they learn them is going to vary. So there needs to be space for that. It needs to allow for differentiation and flexibility. Ideally, there are also differentiated materials built in. For example, in From Sounds to Spelling, there's decodable text, but typically for each decodable text, there will be like an easier level and then a little bit more challenging level. And they're working on the same basic skill, but the more challenging level of that text will have like longer sentences. There'll be more words on the page. And this is really handy because, you probably don't have a ton of time to prepare differentiated materials like that. So when a phonics program has it and it's ready to use, it is just such a time saver, valuable to you and also valuable to your kiddos. Okay, so number 5, the 5th thing that I think is important to look at when you're choosing a phonics program is the level of training and support that's included. Now, a program, you get a new program, it looks great. It might be like clearly written out, but I can't even tell you how many times, even me, like when I'm learning a program and I think, I know how it goes, then I have some kind of training and it just brings a new level of understanding to that program, even though I looked at it very carefully and understood the underlying concepts. That training just helps me understand it better and helps me teach it more effectively. So a lot of times this is accomplished through you'll have a professional development training for your team or your school. Somebody comes in. That is really helpful. I like that, human to human contact. I think that's valuable. However, if you have that at the beginning of the year and then you don't have any more training, or you just have maybe one more training halfway through the year, well, what about when you need support in the meantime, right? What about when you forget that training? You have a lot going on, right? You may learn something and then a couple of weeks later you've forgotten it or you're not quite sure how to apply it. This is why I think built-in professional development is a really key component of an effective phonics program, because if you have videos that you can go back and watch whenever you want, like we have in From Sounds to Spelling, that just, like that's a good, if you have like active PD where it's person to person, great, but that's a good complement that you can go back to whenever you need to. And then if a new teacher joins and maybe you're not doing the like professional development in person or virtual sessions anymore, then that person, that new teacher, can go and look over the videos and really understand how to teach the program without having to have scheduled like something formal. They can just kind of dive in and get there. So for that reason, I feel like professional support, like ongoing, either ongoing trainings or videos that you can refer back to anytime, ideally, are really helpful to have in a phonics program. Okay, so all of these features that we've talked about today are included in our phonics program, From Sounds to Spelling, and you can actually get a free trial of it so that you can really see what we've talked about come to life. Go to FromSoundsToSpelling.com and then look for the button that says free trial. And then I'm also going to include a link in this video so that you can get access. Even if you've already got a phonics program, it might just be helpful to see another way of doing it. And there's actually like full weeks of instruction laid out for you, a placement test, lots of goodies in there. So make sure to grab that. Okay, thanks so much for watching. Hope this was helpful. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.